Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. My name is Matt, and I am here to share with you a few things about this channel, how it came to be, how I got here today, and all of that good stuff in this live stream video. And before I do all that, I wanted to say that the reason I'm doing this live stream is I want all of this to come from my heart. I want it to be unscripted, unfiltered, ad hoc, purely just off the cuff. I don't have anything I'm reading off of or anything like that. This is all just human to human interaction. I mean, in this particular moment, it's human to computer, but I think you get what I mean, right? By not recording or editing, I am hoping that my interaction with whoever may be tuning in will be more natural, will be more human. And in that way, I'm hoping we can connect on a deeper level. With that being said, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the channel here. Um, what this channel is all about, essentially, is Buddhism. I will be talking about my experiences with Buddhist meditation and the Buddhist path in general. And I'll be talking about some realizations that I've had, but also, just general concepts and maybe some meditation techniques and things like that. Now, I do want to say that I don't claim to be a teacher. I am not a monk. I'm not a guru of any type. In fact, I've only been practicing Buddhism now for about 3 years. So I'm still very young, if you will, in the Buddhist path. And I still have a lot to learn myself. So none of this is to try and talk down to anybody or act like I'm above anyone else because I'm not. This is actually all about just seeing if I can help someone else out and also helping myself because the more that I express the teachings that I have learned and the realizations I have had, the more it kind of solidifies for me. So, this is as much about the audience as it is about me as well. So hopefully we all benefit from this channel. Um, and I wanted to make it about Buddhism specifically because I do have another channel out there with a good friend of mine, a really dear, dear friend of mine, Josh. And that channel is called Radical to Rational. There's a link to it in this channel on the front page, I believe. So if you go, I think, to the bottom of this channel's page, you will see a link to the Radical to Rational channel. And on that channel, we talk about our struggles with anxiety that we've had in the past and how we've been able to overcome that. We do talk about Buddhism a little bit, but we talk about other spiritual paths as well. We talk about philosophy. We talk about just life in general. And again, that channel kind of has similar intentions in that it is there to hopefully help somebody else in the world. There's this feeling that you get, and I think all of us do, where as you tread a certain path and as you find that it's helpful to you, you naturally want to help others. So that's kind of what we're doing with these channels here. But this one in particular is a branch off of that, and I'm just doing it by myself here. I may have other people come on periodically, but mostly it'll just be me. Um, and this one is here to focus particularly on the Buddhist path and to dive deep into Buddhism specifically, because that is what I personally follow at this point in time. And specifically, Theravada Buddhism is kind of where we will hang out, if you will, for the most part. But we will, take wisdom and insight where we can from the Mahayana path and the Vajrayana path. And there may be times where we even, um, bring in some perspectives from other spiritual paths, maybe Advaita Vedanta, maybe Taoism, things like that. But for the most part, this will be focused on Buddhism. And so that is the purpose of this channel, and hopefully I have been able to introduce it here well enough. So what I'm going to get into now is how I got here today and how I got to Buddhism today. And I'm going to try to keep it brief. I won't bore you with my entire life story, although I do feel like there are some interesting things about it. But I'm going to focus just on the religious aspects of my life and how I got here today. And to start off, I did not grow up in a Buddhist family. As I mentioned earlier, I've only been practicing it for 3 years now, roughly. Um, and I didn't only follow one path before this. There have been multiple religions and spiritual traditions that I have looked into and practiced along the way before finding Buddhism. And it's not that I didn't know about Buddhism earlier. I just didn't take it seriously until recently. So we'll probably get into that a little bit. But for me, I grew up in a Protestant Christian home. And so if you're not familiar with Protestantism, it's basically another form of Christianity. It's not Catholic, it's not Orthodox. It came a little bit later than those traditions. It didn't really, you know, become a thing until, gosh, I want to say like the 1500s, if I'm saying that accurately, somewhere roughly around there, right? And so, Protestantism was really kind of a reaction to some of the problems um, in Catholicism. And, you may know of Martin Luther, who was one of the first kind of proponents, if you will, or maybe even founders, if you want to call it that, of Protestantism. But that's what I grew up with, right? I grew up going mostly to non-denominational churches, but I've been to all Protestant denominations. What I mean is churches of different Protestant denominations. So Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, you name it. I've probably been to one of those churches at least a handful of times. So that's what I grew up with, and that's what I'm familiar with. Um, Grew up here in the United States of America with that. So, that's not unusual, right? It's a pretty widespread religion within the U.S. Um, and it wasn't really until about age 14 that I started to kind of question things about Christianity. In fact, I can remember being at a church camp and, just I started to question what I was being taught. There were things that I didn't really believe were true anymore. And that's really when I started, around age 14 to kind of think outside the box a little bit. But, being that I was still very young and still living at home and all that, I still went to church. I still um, played the Christian card, if you will, but I can't say that I was really fully into it or following it. I can even remember being about 16 years old and breaking away from the worship service at the church I was going to at the time. And I was supposed to be going to my Sunday school class afterwards. But I went and got in my truck and drove to Jack in the Box instead and enjoyed my time there and came back to meet up with my family by the time church had gotten out. And they're like, "Oh, hey, how was Sunday school?" And oh, it was great. I loved it. What'd you learn? And then, just pull something out of the ether. And I learned about Joseph and the Technicolor suit or coat that he wore. So horrible, right? I'm lying to my parents and all that. But that is what was kind of the beginning of me thinking differently, right? Thinking outside of the box, not really sticking to what I had grown up with. And it wasn't, though, really until I moved out of the house and was living on my own, and I was 19 at this time, that I really started to dive into other spiritual paths. And the first one that I really got into, let me take a drink here. Excuse me. the first one I really got into was the Hare Krishna movement. So, some people may call that a form of Hinduism. Some people might say it's not really Hinduism; it's kind of a cult. But that's what I first got into was that, and so that is a movement within the Vaishnav tradition of Hinduism. Again, people kind of have their qualms about whether it's actually Hindu or not. But as you probably know, Hinduism is an umbrella term for many different sects or smaller religions, right? So you have people that follow Shiva, you have people that follow Vishnu, you have people like the Hare Krishnas that follow Krishna, who is supposed to be an avatar of Vishnu. And so for me, Hare Krishna movement was interesting and actually in a lot of ways fairly similar to Christianity in the sense that you had a supreme god that you focused on that was supposed to be the creator of all of existence and everything we know on this earth and beyond. And you had a type of worship service, where Radha and Krishna are sitting there in the center, and you're focused on them, and you play music and you chant various chants, and you have incense and you have iconography and all of these things, right? And you have your scripture, right? The Bhagavad Gita is the main scripture that is used within uh, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Hare Krishna movement, what have you, right? So um, the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, the Krishna book, as it is belovedly called, and things like that, right? And many other books written by Prabhupada, who is kind of the founder of the Hare Krishna movement. Now, um, there is a parampara or a lineage that goes back way, way far back before Prabhupada. Prabhupada was really a big figure, like in the 1960s. He came over to the U.S. He started talking about Krishna, and there were a lot of young, a lot of them were male, but there were females too that really got interested into this path. They thought, wow, this person has a lot of very wise, wonderful things to say. Um, let's get into it. So you will find that there are a lot of Westerners who are involved in the Hare Krishna movement, and again, Prabhupada coming over in the 1960s and teaching about Krishna was kind of the perfect time, right? Because that was the time when the counterculture was happening. A lot of people were questioning the status quo, questioning kind of the biblical roots that America was supposed to be, raised on or what have you. And so I think that's really where the religion itself, the Hare Krishna movement or Gaudiya Vaishnavism, took off, right? But I say all that to say it was easy for me to get involved because there were a lot of Westerners following that movement, right? Not only did it have some of these like outlying similarities to Christianity, a lot of differences, of course, very stark differences, but um, in certain aspects and forms, there were some similarities. But not only that, it was also, there were a lot of people there that looked like me, spoke English, things of that nature, right? They grew up maybe in a Christian home and later converted to Hare Krishnaism, if you want to call it that. So, it was easy for me to transition into that. And I spent 7 years in that place, um, reading books, attending the temple, doing the practices, chanting the Maha Mantra on my mala beads. Um, I even worked at a Hare Krishna store for a little while. And so, I got a lot out of that. It was a completely different perspective for me. And in a way, it was kind of like me rebelling too from what I was raised with and things like that. Um, And I even took up vegetarianism when I became, a Hare Krishna person, if you will. And so there were just so many things that changed at that point for me. But after 7 years of really diving deep into that movement, I started to question some things, just like I had with Christianity. And I also, I had to come to terms with the fact that it really didn't change me as a person. I still kind of had a lot of the habitual problems that I always had, that really kind of sprung up in my teenage years. Um, and it was intellectually stimulating, but it didn't really change my heart, right? So after those 7 years, I thought, let's go back to kind of our roots, right? I'm gonna go back to being a Christian again. I feel like, that's what I was raised with. That's where I feel comfortable. Maybe I just need to go back, right? But I wanted to do something a little bit different. Um, I didn't really want to go back to the Protestant church, so I became interested in Orthodox Christianity, Eastern Orthodox, Orthodoxy, a couple different terms for it, but um, I really became interested in that, and again, I felt there were some similarities between what I had experienced within the Hare Krishna movement or Gaudiya Vaishnavism, if you will, and Orthodoxy, Orthodox Christianity, which was again, there was iconography in both of them. There was even incense in both of their liturgies. Uh, there was a meditative practice in a sense of, with the Hare Krishnas, you have mala beads where you chant a mantra. With Orthodox Christians, you have the prayer rope, which is a rope that is tied into little knots. And they essentially, if you look at it, it kind of looks like beads, but it's all made out of rope. And you chant the Jesus prayer or the prayer of the heart, going around the prayer rope, right? And so that practice was similar as well. And you even had almost a yogic form of spiritual practice or prayer within Orthodoxy, which is the Hesychasm movement, which is real popular, like in the Athonite culture and monasticism and things like that, right? And that was another aspect as well. You have a monastic movement in both, right? So there were just so many similarities between the two, and I felt like if I was going to go back to Christianity, Orthodoxy for me was really the way that I wanted to go. And I found it to be uh, pretty awesome in the beginning. And another thing really that drew my attention was this concept of theosis, which is man can essentially become so united with God that there's almost, they wouldn't, Orthodoxy would not say that you become God in essence, but there's almost, you know, a mirror like image between God and man at that point. You're able to achieve a level of holiness that is pretty much divine. And so, there's this process of kind of getting there through much prayer and asceticism. That was another thing that was similar between these two movements, the asceticism. There's fasting in Orthodoxy, just like there's vegetarianism in Hare Krishna movement and things like that. So, the asceticism was there as well. And for me, that just really spoke to me. It felt like this is the path to go on if you want to be Christian. That's how I felt, right? It just felt so true to me. It also had the history of being, supposedly the Church of the Apostles that had been around since the very beginning, right? And so I felt, well, if it's been around that long, there must be something true about it, right? Uh, and I don't know whether that really holds true in the long run with everything, but you get where I'm going. It felt more authentic, right? More ancient, more traditional. So I did that for 7 years. This is the same amount of years that I was in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and uh, after 7 years, I came to the same conclusion that I had in the beginning uh, with Christianity is that one, I started to question some things. I also didn't really like some aspects of orthodoxy in terms of, they were very exclusive. Everything was very shut off from the outside world, even to other Christians. I mean, if you come into an Orthodox church as a Protestant Christian or a Catholic Christian, you can't take communion with them. You have to be Orthodox to partake of the Eucharist in an Orthodox church. And to me, that just felt very closed. I mean, I know they have their reasons for that, and I get that. I understand their reasoning behind it, but it just didn't feel very loving to me. Um, and that wasn't the only exclusive thing. I mean, there are some Orthodox Christians, granted, not all, but there are some that believe that you can't even pray with other Christians. So it's just the exclusivity of it all. Um, it felt kind of like a culture club. There were a lot of churches that were really centered around the culture of the people, rather than the culture of Christ, if you will. And so, that it was kind of hard to integrate into that a little bit. But I never really had a problem that much with the culture because obviously I have no issue going to, places that are completely alien to what I grew up with. So that wasn't like a huge problem for me. Um, but out of all these things, the worst was that I not only had not changed, just like before, like I really like some of the habitual behaviors that I found to be very negative, a negative aspect of my person had not changed. Not only that though, but I felt like I got worse. I mean, I felt like I genuinely got worse. And I won't get into all the little details of why I think I got worse, but it I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't gonna get any better in Orthodoxy. Um, and, they call it a hospital for the spiritually sick, and, you come there and you're sick, right? And you come to the Orthodox Church, which is a hospital, and you're supposed to get better. I mean, after 7 years, I didn't get better, I got worse, right? And so, for me, that was enough time to tell me that this path really wasn't gonna work for me. And so, here we were again. I found myself at an impasse, and I had to find really what was going to work with me. But at that point, I was so, I guess, exhausted from trying different things that I really thought, man, maybe I'll just become atheist or agnostic, and I won't really believe anything. I'll just live my life. I won't really focus on any religion or spiritual path. I'll just do my thing till the day I die, and that's it, right? We won't really look into anything deeper than that. But um, that didn't last, but maybe a couple months before I'm like, there's got to be more out there. I mean, I've always thought that. I've always believed that there's more to this life than meets the eye. Um, I don't know what that is exactly, but there is more to this life than meets the eye. Um, my favorite movie is The Matrix because I think it just does such a good job of showing that of like, yeah, when you go beyond the veil, there's more behind all of that, right? And so it's worth exploring what that is. It's worth asking these questions. But as we'll learn as we go along talking about Buddhism more, there are some questions that really are pointless. You don't really get anything out of asking them because either they don't have an answer or the answer doesn't really provide you any benefit along the spiritual path. So we'll get into that later. But long story short, to me, it's always been worth exploring more, diving deeper into some sort of spiritual path. And so for me, I really wanted to find something that didn't really require like belief in a god or some sort of like doctrine or creed that you had to live by. I just wanted something that just worked. I mean, almost like therapy, in a way of like, I just want to go and I don't want to really talk about like a god or a belief system. I want to go somewhere that just focuses on healing, focuses on, hey, let's really work on making you a better person, on helping you become the best version of yourself. And let's cut out all the fat, if you will. Let's get rid of all the fluff and let's really get down to the meat of it all, to the heart of the matter. And I found Buddhism, especially Theravada Buddhism, to be just that. And the reason I say Theravada is because, you know, um, when I first started attending Buddhist temples, I went to a Mahayana temple. And this is not an indictment towards Mahayana. I love so many aspects of the Mahayana path. I read a lot of Mahayana books. I um, learn from a lot of Mahayana teachers, and I know, there's paths like Zen, which is a part of Mahayana, that is very, very focused on meditation, right? So I'm not saying it's not focused on that, but there was a Mahayana temple that I attended for a while. Um, that was less focused on meditation. And I mean, they did meditate there, don't get me wrong, but the meditation maybe would have been about 20 minutes at max. And the rest of the time, you're chanting these chants in different languages. You're, singing these devotional chants or what have you towards these bodhisattvas, right? These enlightened beings or other Buddhas. Um, and so, I just felt that and even with the teachings there, the teachings were very short, it might have been 10 to 20-minute talk. I felt I needed something that really honed in on the silent meditation more than anything else, because that to me over time felt like the most um therapeutic practice. And so I was like, if I can really find a place that is just like dialed into silent meditation and teaches you how to uh, become a better meditator, that's what I want, right? And granted, like I said, I know within Mahayana you have like Zen, which is highly focused on that, right? So again, this isn't a blanket statement towards Mahayana at all, but what I found is I later went to a Theravada temple and I found that it was mainly focused on silent meditation. Um, there are obviously teachings, right? There are Dhamma talks, which you absolutely have to have. They are totally part of the path. There are also chants that you do. Granted, a lot of them will either be, somewhat devotional chants towards the Buddha, or they may be like suttas where you chant the sayings or the teachings of the Buddha. So you have like the Metta Sutta. But really, the content of that Metta Sutta, right, is so universal and so um what do I want to say? Foundational to just being a good person, right? Because if you look at the Metta Sutta, which we'll look at it in later videos, but um, it's really just all about compassion and love and um, seeing no difference between you and your fellow man or woman, and there's no fluff there, right? It's just pure. This is what compassion, this is what love, this is what acceptance is all about, right? No belief system, no extra stuff added on top. It's just exactly what you need. So I found that to be very beautiful, and I found also the fact that this temple focused, I mean, 95% of the time on silent meditation. I found that to be very beneficial. Um, and the other thing was, nobody asked me in that Theravada temple. Nobody asked me, uh, hey, are you interested in becoming Buddhist? Because if you are, like, here's kind of the steps you need to take, or blah, blah, blah. And there's never been like a formal ceremony of like, hey, here's what you do, and we'll kind of do this and that. And now you're formally a Buddhist. It's all just been come in as you are, sit down, meditate with us, learn with us. And if you want to call yourself a Buddhist after a while, do it. If you don't, fine. We're not even really worried about the label Buddhism. It's just about the practice. And that to me was so pure and so pragmatic, right? So to the point that it's just here we are. We're here to practice. That's what we're here to do. And so that's the path I've been on now for about a year and a half. Well, so Buddhism in general for 3 years, but Theravada Buddhism for a year and a half. Now, do I call myself a Theravada Buddhist? Do I label myself as that? I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring out like what I am. But then again, once we get into these teachings, we'll realize that the labels don't really matter, right? Um, and again, there's the teaching of the not self. I don't want to start getting too deep into all that right now because that's going to be saved for a later time. But there are problems with identifying and clinging on to identifying with things, right? Um, so if someone wanted to call me a Theravada Buddhist, I wouldn't argue with them. But at the same time, I don't necessarily go around saying that's what I am. I just practice. That's what I do. I just practice. Um, and I think that has been the most beneficial thing for me is just focusing purely on that. And that has made me a better person. It genuinely has. I mean, within 3 years of this practice, I am already light years ahead of where I was before in 7 years of orthodoxy or 7 years of Hare Krishna. Now, again, I don't want to come across as saying that those paths are invalid or they're bad. I don't want this to be an indictment towards those paths. I still have a lot of respect for those paths. Um, I don't feel like they work for me, but I can acknowledge that they probably work for other people, right? Or else they wouldn't even be out there, right? So I am of the belief that, again, I believe I said this earlier in the video. Different people have different things that work for them based off of different personalities and different just modes of operation. We're all different. And so you have to find what works for you. And for me, at least up until this point, and I mean, look at my history, right? There's been a lot of changes. It's been very dynamic. So I can't promise that, I'm going to be this way forever. The only thing I know is change, but that's another teaching we'll get into within Buddhism is that everything changes all the time. Nothing is constant. There is impermanence in this realm. And so, change is really the only constant. That's a famous quote, that people use all the time, but it's true. It is so true. And so that's why, I try not to say like, oh, well, now I'm this, and that's what I identify as, and now I'm all healed and everything's perfect, and now this is how it's always going to be. I just I just focus on today. I just focus on the present moment, and that's another thing that Buddhism has taught me is to focus on the here and now. The past is gone, the future is unknown. We have the present, and so that's what we need to focus on. And so that and all the other teachings that we're going to get into, as well as practices that we'll get into. We will talk about meditation itself also as we go along here. That has been so helpful for me. It has been so instrumental in my healing, in my in my journey to wholesomeness, all of the things, right? It's been so instrumental. And so that's why I'm here today. That's how I got here. That's why I created this channel. And I'm hoping to spread that healing and that love and that peace and that serenity to others out there. And so if you're tuning in and that's something you're interested in, join me. I plan to dive deep into this path with you. Um, and hopefully we'll all get something out of it. Now, I will say, I am a very busy man. None of this is monetized. None of this is advertised. This is all just something I'm doing because I felt like I need to do it. But it is very much a hobby and very much something that I just am able to do when I have time. So I can't promise that videos are just going to be coming out, like every day or even every week. They could be pretty spread out. If you've paid attention to my other channel, Radical to Rational, you'll see those have been pretty spread out. And it's even been many months now since we've uploaded a video. So, and hopefully we'll get back to that. But point being, things might be a little sporadic, a little spread out, but I hope that you will get something from this. I know I will if I continue putting effort into it. So let's see where it goes. Let's see what happens. So that's all I have to say for today. If you've tuned in, thank you. And I hope you were able to take something away from this. So I will hopefully be back for the next video with some basics of Buddhism, some basic teachings and things like that. And we'll kind of start from the very foundation, very, very simple start and work our way into it from there. And so that's it. Thank you and have a wonderful day or night or wherever you may be. I hope you have a wonderful time. Take care.